Hi everyone, my name is Kira and I am a bridal hairstylist here in Ottawa, Canada. Now I wanted to do this session as a live, but I also didn't want to run into any technical difficulties, so I'm going to record this in its entirety as if it were a live. I'm not going to edit anything. I guess the only difference is your comments and your questions will not be responded to live, but feel free if you have any questions throughout the video, you can pop them in the comments and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So if you're tuning in, we are going to go over 9, I think there's actually more than 9, but 9 sort of game-changing tips that you can use for better half up, half down. I'm not going to do this as a full tutorial. As you can see, I've already started to prep some of Rebecca's hair. Speaking of Rebecca, this is my model, Rebecca Rose. She is the owner and lead makeup artist here at Rebecca Rose Beauty, where we share some studio space. So she's graciously volunteered to be my model today. So yes, I prepped some of Rebecca's hair at the back, just to give it a little bit of a wave, and then everything else we'll do together. What else do I want to chat about at the beginning? I think that's pretty much all the housekeeping stuff. Like I said, feel free to add your comments and your questions, yeah, I think we'll get going. So, one of the first things I wanted to do was talk about some of the general, I guess, like mistakes that people make when it comes to styling in general. I find, even for myself, I used to look at a style and think, okay, this is loose, this is airy, this is effortless, and so I didn't put a lot of thought into the structure of the updo. And when it comes to bridal styling, these styles have to last sometimes 12 hours, even more than 12 hours, so it's not something that's editorial that just needs to stay for the photo shoot. We need to think longevity, marathon, not a sprint. So one thing I want to change your mindset about is thinking about the foundation versus the decoration. So it's almost like, if you're going to build a house, let's say, you want to really pour the foundation, you want to make sure you have, the right bones in place, and then the decoration comes at the end, and it's something that just sort of amplifies the style that you have. So thinking about that, the way that I want you to think about even your half updos is making sure that, as you're going through, you're thinking about, okay, what am I doing as the foundation and what am I doing as a decoration? So even though something looks loose, that doesn't mean that, it's not secured. So that's one thing I really want you to think about, and one thing that's really changed the way that I've approached bridal styling, because something looks like it's very effortless doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of effort put into it and that it hasn't been mapped out. So to get started, what I'm going to chat with you about is what I've done already on Rebecca and the tools and the products that I've used. And I do like to think of everything in those two categories. So we have the foundation and we have the decoration. So for the foundation, I blow dried in a product called Chiffon, which is a styling mousse from R&Co. So I blow dried that in at the top, sort of about to the occipital bone, and on the sides. This is a foundation product for me. This is something that's going to build a lift at the root. It's not going to provide a lot of hold, but it's really revitalizing the root. Let's say there were any kinks at her root, if she has naturally curly hair. I'm going through and I'm, again, like laying the foundation. So this would be, I'm just at the lot that I'm going to build my house on, and I'm making sure that the surface is nice and smooth. I don't want to have any holes. I'm not going to build a house on, lots of rocks, things like that. So I go in and I make sure I blow dry at the root. Any sort of root boosting product. I do enjoy Root Boost by Moroccan, and I also really enjoy Chiffon from R&Co. So I did that first, and then I went through and in the areas that I am going to be braiding, so that's one of the styles that I posted recently, and a lot of you had questions about, merging the two braids or the twists seamlessly. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have, I think probably a braid on either side coming back into the middle. So for the sections that I know I'm going to be braiding, I used my Sam Villa texture iron. It's away right now, but if you just Google Sam Villa texture iron, it will come up. It's one of my favorites. Just to provide, again, this is a structural thing, this is a foundational thing. I am adding just a little bit of texture to her hair in the areas that I know I want to braid, because I want to make sure that that braid is able to be pulled apart and there's some structure to that hair. It's not like you're taking, wet spaghetti limp noodles and trying to pull them apart. We want to have some structure to the hair before we even get started. So again, I used my texture iron along the side, so from her part, on this side, on the other side, and a little bit through the back, through the crown. What else did I do on you? Oh, I did a little bit of back combing. So again, I use back combing as a structural thing. It will help in my decoration. I say decoration with air quotes. In my decoration later, because it will help me, you know, move the hair, see that texture. But it's my scaffolding. It's my when you have walls and you have your framing. It's like the framing of the style. So the back combing all throughout the crown. So I started right about the top of her head and I back combed to about the occipital bone. That's gonna add the volume, but it's also gonna be the base for my pins. Whenever I am securing the twists and I'm securing the braids, those pins have something to sit into. So if you're not doing any sort of back combing here at the crown, those pins don't really have anywhere to secure into and to anchor into. So I like to do a little bit of back combing through here. Nothing crazy, depending on what your client wants. You don't have to make it, you know, as super high sort of Texas hair. You don't have to do that, but just enough so that there is some padding in there. And whenever I press down, I can really feel that cushion. And that's what I want for this kind of style. And I think that's it. Then I curled her hair alternating directions just with a 1 1/4 inch curling iron from GHD, just to give it a little bit of texture. I didn't want to spend too much time here for the purpose of this video, but I wanted to give it a little bit of a bend. So yeah, those are the products and tools that I've used so far. And I think that is it. So I'm just looking at my my notes here because I did make some notes. I think that this is a really good opportunity to get into the braids and the twists. Everything will kind of go together because the style is cohesive. I might touch on the same things, or I might repeat myself in the 3 different categories, because we're going to go over braiding and twisting, especially for a half up, half down look, how to pull out hair around the face that's going to be flattering and frame the face nicely, and also how to secure those braids. So they all kind of touch on each other, but those are the 3 pillars that I'm going to go over, with the first one being the actual braids themselves. So if I turn Rebecca's chair to the side, you'll see that I left out the hair at the very front, so kind of in front of the ear. I did not curl that. This is very typical to what I would do on the wedding day for a bride. I like to get a big chunk of the work out of the way first before going and creating the braids, but I don't need to curl everything. Definitely not. I'm going to do my braids first, and then the hair that's left out, I may curl the ends if I need to, or it might just all blend together. So one of the things that I like to start with at this stage is I want to map everything out. Much like a house being built has a blueprint and there's a plan, you want to look at your hairstyle, whether it's half up, half down, even all down or all up, and you want to map out where you're going to land, where you're going to end up. Otherwise, you're just kind of starting and you have no end in sight, you have no goal to get to, and sometimes things just don't really work out the way that you want them to. So I always like to have a chat with my client beforehand to see, okay, you know, does she want to have, or do they want to have hair out around their face? Are they wanting to have it all back? And making sure that you are having that conversation with your client beforehand. Let's just pretend that we have already chatted with Rebecca, and she says she wants to keep, you know, a heavy piece out around her face. Whenever you are deciding how much hair to braid or how you're going to be picking up your sections, one of my top tips for braiding is never take any straight lines. These 2 things, this tip kind of works for both the face framing and the braids themselves. So let's say Rebecca wants to keep out quite a bit of hair at the front. I am not going to take this straight line kind of coming from her part down to her ear, because that's not very natural, and it's not going to allow me to pull the braid out and conceal this line. We don't want to see any visible scalp when it comes to the braid, because then the hair looks a little bit finer. So we just want to make sure that whenever we are picking up hair and keeping hair out around the face, both sections are either zigzagged or bubbles, so like C shapes. So for example, I know here that this is some of the hair that I want to braid. I am going to start here right at the part, and I've taken a little bit of a C shape. And I'm sure you can see that, because I don't, like I said, I want this to be as soft as possible around the face. I'm actually going to switch my position here. Another tip for braids is that, especially for a half up, half down, 2-strand braids are the most flattering. So a 3-strand braid, which is your typical plait or your French braid or your Dutch braid, because the hair has to be broken into 3 sections, each strand is a little bit finer, and the braid itself looks a little bit thinner than if you just take a braid or you create a braid with 2 strands. So that could be a rope braid, that could be a fishtail braid. A fishtail braid would give the illusion that it was, in fact, a 3-strand braid, and a rope braid would give the illusion that it's a twist. So that's my biggest, hopefully this is my biggest takeaway for you, is that 2-strand braids are the most flattering. So I am going to start here with Rebecca's hair. Take this first section. Making sure that, again, you don't want the ear to be exposed. This can also lead to the hair looking a little bit fine. And we want to make sure that the whole perimeter around her face and her ear are covered. So if I were to pick up this strand of hair and notice that her ear is exposed, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to let that go. And that already looks so much more full. Zigzagging. When you are braiding, keep in mind how much hair you need to add to make it look as full as possible without tying yourself down. And what I mean by that is, if I am grabbing hair and I'm grabbing hair all the way to the middle, that means I have no control, I have no flexibility where I place that braid. So wherever I'm picking up hair, that is where the braid is going to sit. And oftentimes it's sitting up too high, and it's above the occipital bone. We want it to rest a little bit lower. So if you can, depending on the density of hair that your client has, stopping about, just behind the ear is where the last piece that I picked up, and then just free braiding downwards, because as we know, when we braid, wherever we place our hands, that's where the braid is going to go. So if I hold it up too high, we're gonna get some slack here, which we don't want. So we're holding our hands down low. And this way, I have so much freedom. I can drape it down here, I can drape it up a little bit higher. You can control where that braid lands. But if you were, like I said, if you were grabbing hair as you go and grabbing hair the whole time, all the way to the back, you have no control over where that braid ends. The other thing that I notice a lot of people wanting to do is braiding this all the way to the end and then securing it, all the way up here. We don't need to do that. Another tip I want you to take away is only braiding to about halfway. So finding the middle of her head at the back of the occipital bone, only braiding halfway. You're gonna braid halfway on this side and halfway on the other side. And that way, these are going to match up quite nicely, and you're gonna have some hair at the end here that you can curl and create a little bit more volume in the hair that you're keeping down. So if we only braid halfway, we're gonna stop about here, and my face is probably just gonna go in front of the screen. I like to anchor all of my braids with an elastic, and again, this is going into the foundation of everything. I treat this like an anchor so that whenever I am pinning my hair and my braids, the elastic is like a stopper. If you were to just take this and start pinning at the crown, or sorry, at the occipital bone, there's nothing holding this braid in place. So again, some hairs might fall out, some of the braid might fall out. So I always like to be as secure as possible, and elastics help me do that. So that's that. So we're looking good on this side already. And as you can see, this is going to frame her face quite nicely. We're not getting into the decoration part yet. This is just laying our foundation. Don't worry if this is still a little bit too small. There's not as much volume as you'd like to see. I always like to think of it as when let's say you're building a house, you're creating all of this character with like the crown molding, and you might add a fireplace, and you're doing all these things to the structure of the home. So when you decorate, you only need to do little things at the very end to kind of accentuate the natural beauty and the character that it already has. So same thing with here. We already have some great texture happening. We know we want to do a little bit more, but we don't need to worry about pulling that out just yet. We can do that at the end. Okay, so then I'm going to take it over to this side. So I've done the same thing. I've left out all of the hair kind of right in front of the ear. And so starting up at the part, this is where I'm going to do my little zigzags. sure not to pick up the hair right above the ear because we want this to be as full as possible. And I'm just at her ear, so I might pick up one more time, and then I'm going to free braid, making sure my hands are coming down. That's about the center, so we use our elastic again. Okay, and that's gonna, oh my gosh, that's gonna be so nice. Okay, perfect, right about to the middle. If you accidentally do the elastic a little bit too low, don't be afraid to just shimmy it up a little bit so that it is hitting about the middle of her occipital ball, right at the bottom there. Awesome, so we can go into, now that we're at the face, you can see that the hair that I left out on Rebecca is quite thick. I say quite thick. It's thick enough that there is no stringiness to the front. You don't see any of her scalp right here. You wouldn't want to, let's say, leave out any less because that hair is gonna look too stringy. We don't want it to look stringy. We wanna make sure it's as full as possible without being too heavy that it's going to be falling into your client's face. So just make sure that that's a conversation that you have with your client to make sure that they're feeling comfortable, that their face is framed enough, but not too much that it's going to start bothering them. They're gonna wanna tuck it behind their ear. So all of her forehead is covered with her hair, and then coming down, you don't see any ear visible. That's another one that you want to make sure that you're covering to make sure that this looks as full as possible. If they had quite fine hair, you could sneak a couple extensions in underneath this braid to add a little bit more fullness and thickness to the front, and be able to cover that ear at the same time as picking up enough hair to make sure that the braid is nice and full. So now, again, before we get started, some of this is a little bit of foundation and a little bit is decoration. But what we want to make sure for the pieces that we're leaving out in the front, you want to add some backcombing, you want to add some volume. Right now, it's not so bad. Rebecca has a little bit of natural volume to her hair, and we did blow dry in the chiffon, which gave the roots a little bit more of a boost. But leaving the hair flat against the scalp isn't the most flattering. It's also more prone to absorbing any oils that she might produce, any sweat that they might produce, and especially on a really hot day. I know here in Ottawa we get quite humid summers, so if that hair is resting against their forehead, it's definitely going to start to look stringy, it's going to start to look wet, and it's going to start to really drop. So we want to make sure that there is some space between their forehead and the hair that we're leaving out, especially here from the part to about the end of their eyebrow. This area here is going to get some backcombing. And I'll show you the difference between the two sides. So we'll leave that one down and we'll backcomb this side. This is probably the biggest face opener as well. Like, it really does lift everything up. The product that I'm using is called Powder Cloud by Schwarzkopf. It's one of my favorites. So I'm gonna come up underneath. Going to brush out any of the little knotted hairs. Other than backcombing and using a comb to backcomb, I typically don't use a lot of tools as I'm styling. I usually just use my fingers. One of my favorite hairsprays is the Session 3 by Osis. I think it's like their Extreme Hold hairspray. It provides so much hold, yet it is so brushable, so if you ever needed to brush out anything, if you felt like you made a mistake or it was just a bit too harsh, it's one of my favorites. Always budget more time than you think you need for the front. I like to say for a half up, half down, I'm budgeting the most time mapping out where the braid is going, spending time creating the braid and finessing the front. The back, of course we want it to be curled, of course we want there to be, you know, volume and texture and all those great things. What they're going to see the most on the wedding day is the front, so you want to make sure that that is perfect. So sometimes I'll even start with the front and not even worry about curling the back until the very end, just to make sure that I have enough time to, you know, that her face is just perfect and everything that's framing her face. Yeah, for today I'm just using a 1 1/4 inch curling iron from GHD. If you've never heard this trick before, you want to keep all of the like lengths together. So you notice that this piece is a little bit shorter than the rest. I don't want to curl it with hair that's a lot longer because the curl is not going to match up in the right spot and the ends aren't going to be as relaxed as I want them to be if this piece was included with these longer pieces. So especially around the face, if they have any layering, you want to make sure you break it up so that all of the hair that's the same length is being curled at the same time. So we'll let that cool a little bit. Sure that I'm getting a little bit of hairspray underneath, and this is going to create a little protective layer against her hair so that if that hair does drop and touch her forehead, there's a little bit of protection in the form of hairspray. And I always see that the front requires so much patience because you want to make sure that everything is sitting just right, that the hair is not separating on you. So if you need to, you can kind of come up underneath and give a gentle back comb. Because remember, back combing is for volume and it's also for control. So it's like you're weaving some hairs together to get them to stick and hold together. And layering your products as you go. So I'm not waiting till the very end to spray this with hairspray for 30 seconds straight. I'm doing short bursts as I am combing out any little flyaways, any visible back combing that you might see that I don't want to be visible, and securing those little hairs in place. can already start to see on the side here, by taking those zigzag parties and doing some back combing to the hair that we're leaving out around the face, you cannot see the visible scalp, like the visible part line, and you don't see the separation between what we kept out in the front and where the braid is. And that is going to be the most flattering. You can go under here as well, because then, let's see. What I see when I'm looking at this is we've got some great volume happening up here. Even the braid, while we haven't done any finessing, any decorating on the braid, it then drops down to the hair underneath, right above her ear, is quite flat. So I would go in, I would see that, and I would clip this braid out of the way, and I would come up under here and back comb this piece so that the volume is maintained throughout the front and just underneath the braid as well. I'm calling it a braid because it is a rope braid. While it looks like twists, I'll continue to call it a braid, so if you're confused, that is why I call it a braid. I may as well curl this while I'm here. If you wanted the curls to be a bit more springier, a little bit tighter, you could definitely use a 1-inch curling iron. And I usually use a 1-inch curling iron on almost every half up, half down that I do. But I wanted this one to be a little bit more relaxed. So if we come over here on this side, same thing, even without doing any back combing here along the side, this line is very much diffused, but I still want to add some back combing to the front pieces here. Spray a little bit of powder, close to the roots, about 1.5 to 2 inches away from the roots. Already, like, that is so much more full, and this is a lot more balanced in the front. Perfect, and that will come down like that. Awesome. So same thing, I'll just quickly curl this while I'm here. Again, making sure I see this piece here that's a little bit shorter, so that's going to be included here. All of my lengths are the same in this one. Okay, so we can leave that for now. So we're getting into the last pillar, I think, of all the things that I wanted to chat about. To recap for the braids and the twists, before we even sectioned any of the hair. We wanted to map out exactly where we wanted to see those braids and which hair we were keeping out around the face. So that's more of a conversation that you have with your client to make sure that they're as comfortable as they can be, and for you making sure that you have enough hair out to be as full as possible. We talked about 2-strand braids being the most flattering just because they seem to be the most voluminous, because you're only splitting the hair into 2 subsections as opposed to 3. So for people with fine hair, I love a rope braid because they still get the look of a braid without losing any of that volume that they may feel like they lack, and it'll help you as well, making sure that the style looks as full as possible. And we stopped picking up hair, so as we're adding hair to a fishtail braid and we're adding hair to a rope braid, we stopped just behind the ear, making sure that we were picking up either zigzagged or curved sections. We never take straight sections as we are adding hair into the braid and as we are choosing what hair to leave out around the face. What else did we talk about for face framing? Again, no straight lines in face framing. We also want to make sure that we're leaving enough hair out around the face, that it is full enough. We don't see any scalp. We don't see any of their forehead through the hair. We want to make sure that's nice and thick, and always adding some back combing, some dry texture spray to give it a little bit of lift all along the part line and all along the hairline, even above the ear, right underneath where the braid is happening. So now we're getting into securing our braids and getting them to match up perfectly. One of the ways that we made sure that this was going to happen is we only braided to about the middle of the head. This one might be actually a bit too much, so I'm just going to shimmy that elastic up a touch. I am going to pull out a little bit, but not too much of this twist before I pin it. And we've also secured it with an elastic, which will be helping with our security back here. So making sure that the braid is coming down and going to rest either right below or close to the occipital bone. That is going to be the most flattering. We don't want it up too high. We don't want to shrink her crown. We want to make the crown area as big as possible. So bringing this down. For the most security, I am going to secure against the grain. So I have my bobby pin. The braid is coming towards her right. So I am going to push the bobby pin in against the grain, against the natural flow of her hair. And this is going to help secure. I've also added some back combing underneath so that this bobby pin, as I'm pushing it in, has something to hold on to. Do a couple, so I'm just kind of coming in here. I'm following the what would I call that? I'm following the braid, so I'm not putting any bobby pins anywhere above or below. I'm not opening the bobby pins. I am taking them. I'm taking a little bit of hair from each side of the twist, and I am pushing it in line with the braid. And then I have this one here. So in order to get them to match up seamlessly, I like to take this elastic. I will use this braid to cover up, I don't want to say the mess I made, but I wasn't too careful about where I put this bobby pin, and I want to cover up the elastic of the first braid that we have. So I am going to cover it, and then I'm going to sneak this elastic up underneath. And I can feel it with the middle finger of this hand that's holding it, where the elastic is. And I'm gonna take my bobby pin, again, against the grain, and I'm gonna put this bobby pin through the elastic of this braid, and with a little bit of hair from the first braid that we secured. I'm pushing this against the grain. Again, I'm coming up here, this is going against the grain. always checking your work to make sure that all of the bobby pins that you have put in are invisible and you can't see them. And this is another reason why I don't go through and curl all the hair at once, because I don't know which direction I want this to go until it's laying in the hair. I may want this to go this way. I might want to separate it into two and do a curl going towards the face, one going away from the face. So I don't worry so much about the hair of the braid. I don't need it to be curled, and that's going to save you a little bit of time as well. Perfect. And then you can come up here and add a little bit of texture as you need to. Picking up the pieces, the ends, the tail ends of the braids that we've created and secured. And making sure that they blend with the rest of the hair. And I'll do the same on this side. How's it feeling, Rebecca? Secure?
Yes.
Secure? Secure.
Not painful.
But not painful. That is key.
Yes.
That is key. Awesome. So I'm just giving a little brush out to the waves that we did here on your face. If you need to, this is the stage where you're going to do your decorating. So if there was anything as I'm looking at this style from all angles, okay, a little piece I want to pull up here, a little texture I want to create there, taking a step back to make sure that everything is looking good. You can always go through to these pieces underneath. Sometimes what I'll do is I will pick up a few here and there. A curl that I've done previously. I added a little bit of volume powder, and then I'm just going to go up and back home just a little bit. Do the same thing over here. This is a visual thing, just seeing where you want to see a bit more dimension. You want to be able to see the curls or the waves kind of come out at you a bit more 3D. You can just go ahead and pick one up, give it a little bit of backcombing towards the root. So you can see that it's draping nice and low. We still have lots of her crown. So from the top of the head to the occipital bone, this is all of the texture we want to see. We don't want to cut that off any higher. And that is a key takeaway from today too, is making sure that that's a little bit lower. My big head isn't coming into the frame and covering all that up for you guys. If somebody had really fine hair around the front and you tried everything and it just wasn't camouflaging their scalp, you can always use products like, this one's by L'Oreal, like a root touch-up root concealer, and you can use this and spray it at the scalp just to create a little bit more, I'm going to use the word camouflaging again, but just to create a little bit more darkness at the root, at the scalp, so that in photos it's not as visible, because of course when you see scalp, it makes it just look and feel a little bit finer, or their hair to be a little bit thinner than you want it to. So using those root sprays, or even like a dark brown or dark colored eyeshadows, if you want a little bit of a softer look, can just help in those areas where you can really see a visible scalp, even on the part line as well. If it's quite sparse at the top, you know, where their hair is, you can also use either a root spray or a eyeshadow palette as well. Most people want to take a little bit of hair to the front, so we're going to do that while we can see how everything, oh my gosh, beautiful. I literally fussed with the front for ages, so sometimes I just need to cut myself off. Okay. So I think this is our finished look. I hope that some of this landed with you and you've learned something that you didn't already know before today. Of course, I wasn't able to give you like the full tutorial, but I still hope that there was enough information there to feel like this was a valuable chunk of your time. So I do appreciate you spending some time with us. And if you have any questions, like I said, pop them in the comments. I hope I did a really good job of explaining what I was doing and how I was doing it, but of course, some things just come so naturally to me that I forget to even chat about them. So let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for following along.
Good job.